So, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this new webinar of the series organized by the International Environmental Justice Committee of Division 52 of APA, International Psychology. I'm Luca Theo, and I will be the host and the moderator of this event. The title is Critical Direction in Environmental Psychology. Today we have two very interesting and very young, I would say, speakers who are Steffen Krenzer, who is a psychologist and is currently working for German NGO called More Democracy, where he is responsible for the interface activities of citizen participation and climate protection. And he is also one of the editors of the Handbook of Climate Protection, who is in press and will be also mentioned today. Our second distinguished guest is Sascha Kuhn, Dr. Sascha Kuhn, who received his PhD in psychology at the University of Heidelberg. He has been a researcher at the German Institute for Development and Sustainability for the program Transformation of Economic and Social Systems. And he is currently postdoc in social psychology at the Ruhr University of Bochum in Germany. And he is particularly focused on the colonialism and the colonial approach. And he published several works already on how people make sense and may deal and accept environmental policies. So before giving the stage to our speakers, I would just like to remind you that you can use the Q&A chat to start already asking your question before the end of the presentation. I will take your questions and comments and present to our speaker for an answer. So, Steffen, Sascha, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening. It depends where you are. We're based in Germany. Here it's 5 p.m., a sunny afternoon. And we're glad that we can be here, share our ideas, and have a little discussion with you. Maybe a few words on our working group. Sascha, thank you. So we are both members of the working group AK Kritische Umweltpsychologie, which is German for Working Group Critical Environmental Psychology. We're a Germany-based organization. We exist for like 5 years now, and we have a trans and interdisciplinary approach. So most of our members are psychologists or have some psychological background, but not everyone. So we also have like health practitioners or coaches, people who work for NGOs like myself, for example. So yeah, we really take this trans and interdisciplinary approach serious, or we're trying to at least. And the goal of our group is to develop this critical environmental psychology approach further, and also to spread our ideas into science, like universities, but also into climate movement and your other actors around this field, let's say. Our latest project was a book project, Understanding Crisis, Developing the Ability to Act, and more on that in a few minutes. We have a website. Unfortunately, only a few pages are available in English, but nevertheless, of course, you can check it out. Sascha.
So we would like to talk about the critique and the reasoning why we started a book project that Steffen mentioned that will come out in September. But before we get to the critique, I quickly want to remind you or run you through the historical development of environmental psychology and how it has approached environmental destruction. So the roots can be found in social psychology by thinkers such as Brunswick and Levine, who criticized the overly individualistic view of the discipline. And this strongly initially influenced thinkers that worked or started the field of environmental psychology. Helpach was the first to coin the term environmental psychology, but in the literature, one usually refers to the start, not only until the 1960s. And the initial focus of environmental psychology was mostly on architectural psychology. So the impact the environment and changes of the environment have on the human and also on human health. But then in the 1980s, the first journals were launched, such as the Journal of Environmental Psychology in Europe and the Journal of Environment and Behavior in the US. And the focus shifted a bit on the impact of individual mostly consumer behavior, whereas that led to the greening of the field. The focus was more set on sustainability, sustainable behavior. One tried to connect to other green narratives. And most of you probably also aware of the publications and the changes that then took place in the 2000s, mainly through the publication of a book, Nudge, by Thaler and Sunstein, where the focus then was mainly on how to come up with ways and interventions to promote sustainable behavior. So environmental psychology, in a way, positioned itself in relation to other psychological subdisciplines as a quite a progressive discipline. So early on, environmental psychology challenged prevailing assumptions, especially deviations from like rational choice models, such as the axioms by the Homo economicus. And if we look at the people that usually work in this field, and I don't have, this is more anecdotal evidence, most of us would consider themselves as progressives in support of sustainability, green policies, but that the question that we want to raise also in this talk is, are we really that progressive, or are we in a way still upholding and legitimizing the status quo of capital growth that is responsible for the destruction and exploration of humans and the environment? And in order to get to this critique, we want to look at the prevailing theory of change that we perceive. So psychologists are pretty good in designing, constructing models that explain environmental behavior, such as the theory of planned behavior. Maybe you're familiar with others. And this overarching theory of change entails that one behavior can lead to another, leading to sustainable lifestyles, which will eventually have an ecological impact and reduce the so-called CO2 footprint. And as mentioned before, since the publication of Nudge and even before that, environmental psychologists are engaging in research on how to come up with interventions that increase the likelihood of people to actually engage in sustainable behavior. However, more and more researchers have critiqued certain parts of this theory, such as you're probably all familiar with the intention behavior gap. So not all intentions translate to behavior. Also now, recently, more and more meta-analyses are appearing on behavior change interventions that show little to no effect of interventions on actual behavior. They do find small effects on intention, but still no major effects on behavior. Also, there's this whole research on spillover effects, so how one behavior A affects another behavior B, and also the most recent meta-analysis show that there are no large effects or hardly any. So one can argue, okay, maybe our interventions are not good enough, our methods are not good enough, we need better processes to lead to lifestyle, support lifestyle changes. But more and more researchers have started to question this gap of behavior and actual ecological impact. And maybe some of you are familiar with the latest publications that question the impact that the field has. So these are researchers within the field that consider themselves as environmental psychologists, and they're now starting to question their own prevailing theory of change. And next to this, we had or still have a credibility crisis in general psychology, particularly also in social psychology. You're also probably all familiar with the publications relating the replicability of findings. And this, of course, also affects environmental psychology as a discipline. So there has been this, in a way, moment of people questioning, starting to reflect. But the answers that now we perceive that come from the field and multi-level initiatives with lots of funding, they prioritize methods, they prioritize Eurocentric approaches and collaborations where the power still lies within epistemology with the North. So we want to question this answer to this crisis and partly put forward that how we respond to this crisis within psychology and large the environmental crisis, that psychology plays a crucial role. And that's, part of the problem is discipline itself. And with our critique, we want to look beyond the methods and look at the assumptions that are taken for granted and ignore historical and existing social power relations that lead to inequalities and injustices, such as the climate crisis in the first place. So at this point, I would also like to stress with our critique, we do not want to criticize any individuals, any individual researchers or groups of researchers. This is a structural issue within the field, and we hope to bring this to the attention of the field and hoping to find more allies that are open to also decolonize their own knowledge production. And what this means is that we look at what psychological science is actually doing. And psychological science tends to be individualizing, which means that socio-cultural phenomena are usually perceived as a product of individual action and behavior, and thereby abstracting phenomena from social groups and power dynamics. So in a way, psychology, and there's also a great talk by Durham, a professor in South Africa, on the color blindness of psychological science. You should look it up or look at the paper. So this is a huge issue within the discipline, and it affects also on how we look at and talk about sustainability. And this fosters the current narrative, fosters an idea of personal growth and individual responsibility, and thereby greenwashing or focusing on consumption that is greenwashed and is distracting in a sense from larger socio-ecological and cultural change. At the same time, a lot of constructs are deteriorized and are historicized. So phenomena are also usually, in the way we study phenomena, only looked in a short time frame, and the cultural and historical context is completely discarded. Probably most of you are familiar with the critique by Henrich et al. On the samples that are drawn, so that we mostly study white students in Western rich countries, and that it's then from these studies a universal presumed truth that is then generalized to the world. And this excludes participants from the research process. It neutralizes to confront forces and social injustices. And there we perceive that some researchers are starting to take this into consideration, but once again, samples outside of Western countries are usually, in a way, extracted. White researchers are usually the ones who are in charge of these studies, and still the epistemological perspective of the local people and researchers is disregarded. So we need more cooperation, more exchange as well between researchers. And this legitimizes and reproduces hegemonic forms of colonial and neoliberal violence. So our Western psychology is shaping the conception of self, of being, and also of sustainability. If you look at some of the most recent many lab studies, the dependent variables, for example, of environmental behavior, they always are mostly focusing on behavior that is relevant to white consumers, to people living in Europe or America, who have access to bike lanes, who have the potential to buy solar and so on. And other forms of environmental behavior are disregarded. So in that way, a certain neutrality is constructed that centers Western worldviews. And this is a form of intellectual imperialism that we criticize and that we want to overcome, to also overcome the status quo that in a way brings with it the climate violence that we perceive. So we think that as researchers or people working on climate justice, we cannot stay neutral. this neutrality is an oxymoron within our discipline. Other disciplines outside of psychology are taking clear stances or are more open to take stances, where psychology always tries to uphold this neutrality that is prevalent also in natural sciences. So we are trying to find a new theory of change within the field and outside of the field. And we think that we need to look at research and theory on resistance and critical theory, on discourse, on injustice. We need to support collective action. We need to come up with research that actually benefits the collective for a socioeconomic transformation, empowering participants to also be co-creators and co-researchers who take their context serious, and particularly also focus on marginalized groups in the most affected regions who are suffering already the most from the climate crisis, whose worlds are already at the brink of collapsing, and center their views and needs over our Western assumptions and look at sustainability. So there have been a few publications on critical perspectives, such as these. They are really worth the read. Have a look, take a time to read them, and highly recommend them. However, they're still at the margins, and we thought it's time to also give voice maybe to younger researchers and combine certain critiques in a book, make this more publicly accessible. And there at this point, I also want to stress, we do not want to push for a new sub-discipline of critical environmental psychology, but rather we want to get researchers who are involved in the field to become more critical themselves. We want environmental psychology to become as progressive as it once was in order to ally with climate justice. And this is why we engaged in this book project, where Steffen will now talk a bit more about.
Yes, thanks a lot. I will talk a little about the content of the book and a little bit about the process, which might be interesting for some of you. So we were a group of 9 editors, most of them from our working group, and some of the organization Psychologists for Future, which is an organization of psychologists and psychotherapists who want to help the climate movement with their psychological expertise. And what was the goal of the book? We wanted to learn about the field. So as Sascha mentioned, there are a lot of different perspectives on environmental psychology or psychology in general, and a lot of different approaches of how to criticize what is going on, or what is the mainstream psychology at the moment. And of course, our perspective is very limited. So, for example, myself, I'm not even working in research. So, of course, from time to time, I read some papers or books, but I'm not so involved in the community that I could say I know everything that's going on. So we really wanted to learn what perspectives are there out there, what critical approaches, bring them together. And we received over 50 submissions, which is very cool. We were yeah, pretty impressed with that number, and we had a hard time to choose from those 50 submissions. And we, in the end, we came to a number of 25 contributions that are part of the book now, 47 authors, most of them from Germany, but we also have people from Latin America, from India, from Japan, the US, Canada. So it has maybe a focus on Germany, but it is also international. And that was very important for us to really inspire this this broader perspective on the field, because as you might know, the disciplines are a little bit different from country to country. So, for example, the role that environmental psychology has in Germany, I think, is different from the US or UK or whatever other countries. And on the other hand, for example, like a climate psychology, which is popular in UK, maybe we don't even have that in Germany. So and so it can be very inspiring to hear from others what is going on their country. And especially, of course, when it comes to countries or groups from the global south, where the perspective on science and on this whole topic of climate change and climate justice, of course, is a little different. So the book will be published in September this year. The bad news is that it's only in German, but the good news is we're working on an English version, so we're in contact with a publisher, and hopefully we can publish the whole thing in English too soon. What is the structure of the book? We ordered the 25 submissions. The first part of the book is like a very fundamental approach and tries to find a new base, a new a completely new approach on how to build up a critical psychology, a critical environmental psychology. So most of the contributors are scientists who work in universities and know the field very well. And this is the first part of the book. The second part, there we have a lot of people from the global south that have who wrote articles from their intercultural, decolonial perspectives on how to include, for example, perspectives from Latin America, where for example, an environmental psychology really has to be decolonial and has to take into account all the colonization history in Latin America, for example. And so there we have in the second part a lot of voices from the global south. In the third part, we gathered different perspectives on both like psychology and society. So for example, very interesting work on cars and the psychological perspective on cars and why people use them and like them. Yes. So and the book concludes with the fourth part, where we ask ourselves or ask the contributors how can this field of critical environmental psychology come into like everyday practice? What projects can rise from that? And there we have some inspiring projects that hopefully can inspire others. So what's next? We suggest the following steps. I think it's important that we find connections. So as we said, and Sascha mentioned many points of the critique that are at the moment not really connected. So we're not a community yet, I would say. There are really different people in different countries that sometimes they don't even know that they're working like on the same topics. So I think it's really important to find connections, to inspire exchange, and I think also to, of course, to figure out how those different approaches go together, or if they fit together at all. That's not for certain, but we will see. And then the next step will be to develop a frame and maybe a totally new approach. But maybe this is not necessary. Maybe we can have like different approaches stand side by side. We don't know. That is an open question that we can also discuss later. So some reflections about the book project that might be interesting for you. We identified some areas of conflict or some tensions, let's say, between different values. And the first and most important one is, of course, the demographics of the editors, so of ourselves and our claim for diversity. So we are a group of 9 people. We're all of us are white. We're most of us have higher education, and so this is really hardly goes together with our claim for diversity and for including people of color and including people without higher education and so on. So this is a problem, but on the other hand, we decided to do the project nevertheless. We tried to find people who wanted to do this project with us, but just to give you an impression, for example, in my whole study, so bachelor and master program, I think there only were like 4 or 5 people, POC people, so with a POC background, and all of them are, of course, have their own like topics, and they're very busy. So it's so hard to find psychologists, for example, in Germany that have these perspectives from, for example, BPOC, and that have time to engage in such a project. So this is a structural problem, really. Okay, so what was also an area of conflict was the topic inclusiveness versus limited resources. So we're all of us are doing this as a voluntary work. So Sascha is working on university in the field of research, but me, for example, I'm not even doing research as a full-time job. So some of the editors have small children and so on. All of you might know this problem. So it's, we all of us have limited resources, but on the other hand, we wanted to have a project that is inclusive, that, for example, people can be part of that project that have no experience in publishing articles or in doing scientific work. But this, of course, needs resources, for example, for translation or for, I don't know, for strengthening the line of argumentation or whatever, for editing the texts. So this was really an area of conflict. And why am I talking about that? I mean, one could say that's not like professional, and that's yeah, that doesn't matter. But I think it does matter, because the conditions, like, for example, limited time resources, are highly relevant for all our work, and especially for work that is done in progressive directions, because oftentimes we don't have funding, and all the people who are engaging in climate protection or in climate justice or whatever, yeah, have so many projects, and yeah, so we just wanted to make clear that this is, of course, this was a topic for us, and yeah, this probably will be also a topic for your projects. Okay, so yeah, healthy work ethics versus pressure of time. We try to somehow contribute to solutions on climate crisis. Climate crisis has a very limited time frame, so we wanted to publish this book as soon as possible. But on the other hand, as I said, all of us are doing this as a voluntary work. We need some days off sometimes, so this really caused some tension. All of us want to be critical towards the system, towards the capitalist system, towards the science system, the system of how research is done. But on the other hand, all of us are somehow entangled in this system. For example, we had a discussion on who would be the first author to appear on the cover of the book, because of course for a career in research, this is or in academics, this is important, right? If you are the first author of a book, that's pretty cool, or the editor in this case, and pretty important. On the other hand, we don't want to support this kind of mechanism, and yeah, in the end we decided to just put our two organizations on the cover, and to not name any names of us as editors. But yeah, that's, I don't know, some sort of solution maybe, I don't know. So what was also hard was to finding a central theme, because the question, of course, is what is, for example, critical enough? What is is it critical enough when you criticize one method, or when you criticize, I don't know, one problem within science? Is this enough to be part of this field? Or is it enough when you, for example, work on critical psychotherapy that is, yeah, I don't know, trying to be aware of racist problems? Is this enough to be part of this field, critical environmental psychology, or do you need to have a focus on environmental issues? So this was a question for us, how to really find this central theme that holds it all together. And last point, the values of science. So like, yeah, objectivity, or at least, yeah, some neutrality, and so on, versus low threshold literature. So some book that people who don't have this background in science have fun to read, because this is what we wanted to do, write a book that really inspire people outside of the academic bubble to engage in this field. So yeah, this leads us to some open questions that we can discuss now. These, of course, are just some suggestions. You can also come up with your own questions. So who is or who should be key actors in this field of critical environmental psychology? Is it researchers, practitioners, students, professors? I don't know. Who is it that can really bring this this field up? Second question, what is more promising? Is it trying to change the science, trying to change universities, publishing practices, and so on? Or should we rather try to establish a parallel approach, like some transdisciplinary science outside universities that is like done by activists, for example? Then next question, how can we integrate as many people, as many different voices as possible, for example, from the Global South, without exploiting their time? So what I mean by that is, how can we do this really as a project that we all can benefit from, and not something that is pretty cool to do in the Global North, like we're so cool because we work with people in the Global South, but for them it does not have any benefit and just wastes their time. So this is not what we want to do, right? And the last question, do we even need a coherent critical theory, or is it totally fine that we have different approaches that yeah, somehow criticize the science like in a parallel way and just stand side by side? Yeah, that was our presentation. I'm looking forward to your questions and to the discussion, and thanks to Tateo, sorry, and to the APA for hosting us here, and yeah, thanks for the invitation, and thanks for your time, of course.
Okay, so thank you very much, Steffen. Thank you very much, Sascha. And while people can type their questions, please go ahead. Yeah, just let me remind that the recording will be available very soon on our website and our library. So also the slide will be visible. Actually, first of all, let me express my gratitude, because I really appreciated the fact that you are sharing the process and the process and the dilemmas that you are facing during the process, which is very important in interdisciplinary, I think, in transdisciplinary, sorry, collaboration in projects. We can start taking questions. First is, I'm reading, I am a clinical psychologist with extensive experience in environmental psychology. I belong to a college who still does not recognize environmental psychology. Your question, or where to begin, is most relevant. Also, university need to be open and broaden. It's more of a comment, But if I may turn it into a question, is how do you dialogue with your institutions and how the institutions are receiving this project? Sascha, can you, your volume is very low.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me better now? Is it okay?
A bit better, although it's...
I didn't change anything on my microphone.
Okay, now it's working better. Please go ahead.
Yeah, that's always a question and a big challenge, I think. First off, I think there's a curiosity currently in the field out of the frustration that the field has little impact. Still, I must say that there is also the potential of backlash, of barriers put forward when it comes to criticizing the status quo. And I mean, there have been historical waves of critical psychology all over the world. But one example that comes to mind is Klaus Holzkamp in Berlin. And his whole department was kind of defunded at some point in some stage, right? And I experienced also that I got advised not to comment on current affairs. So relating the war on Gaza in Palestine, comment on current colonial struggles. I was advised not to raise this topic in students, not to become a target. So I feel there's a line to play and it's really tricky. And at some point, one needs to acquire funding to prolong the research in a way. And I feel at the moment that is not certain if critical perspectives can prevail, right? And I think that's why we need to organize, that's why we need to network, get together, because of the most valuable perspectives that I have discovered that have something to say about environmental psychology are usually not visible in the journals that one usually looks in for environmental psychology. So we need to get into these journals maybe as well to become more visible.
So I can add one
Please,
thing.
please go ahead.
What is really interesting is for me is that often people outside science and outside psychology are more open to our approach than psychologists or environmental psychologists, because they think that psychology is what really is critical psychology, you know. So they in psychology tends to really focus so strongly on individuals and tend to sorry, what do you still hear me?
Yes, we still hear you.
Okay, sorry, my internet is not working well. Psychology tries to only focus on individuals and do not really take into account the structures. And when I talk to people outside of psychology, they do not understand that. For them, it's quite natural and quite obvious that psychology has to take into account in which contexts people work, live, consume, whatever. And so this is interesting for me, and therefore often it's not really a problem to connect to, for example, people who are part of the climate movement or so. They're really open for our approach. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So let's take another comment and question from Nicholas. Thanks for an enormously helpful lit review and important book project. And very good question, how to create best conditions for collaborating across academic and other practices for environmental justice. Now that there is a very specific question: how to democratize this collaboration in most meaningful ways, from within or by creating parallel structures, such as the current free academia movement, the so-called Göteborg Manifesto. Could you further elaborate on your position in this discussion? And I also suggest that you say something about the Göteborg Manifesto, because not all the audience can be familiar with that.
I'm not so familiar, to be honest, with the Göteborg Manifesto, but in general, to the open science framework, I think it has a lot of good notions in it, but then one also perceives that it reproduces colonial power structures in a way, because in order to do great open science, you need resources, you need the backing, you need the funding, and so on. And if you look at these new larger projects of many lab studies, right, they try to be inclusive, but it's a very discursive silencing. One talks about B, but not about A. One talks about diversity, but not actually that still white researchers are in charge of these projects. So I think in order to overcome this and to democratize these processes, we need more exchanges. We need more smaller meetings, not these huge conferences, transdisciplinary exchanges where we get to know each other on a personal level. For example, we are hosting, or not directly we, but a person that we are friends with, and we have it on our website. Gloria Munoz is hosting a journal club where younger researchers come together, and we read different literature, and out of this we hope to explore possibilities, right? But yeah, in the end, it's a question of how we can maintain this, and it often comes down to funding. And I think there maybe it's also great to collaborate at some point. Yeah, I hope this answers the question. Maybe Luca, you want to explain a bit more about the Göteborg Manifesto?
Well, yeah, even though we have a lot of people in line, but we had you mentioned Gloria. We had the wonderful roundtable with her a couple of weeks ago. So let's move to another question. Perhaps we can partner with fields of psychology that already consider those critical variables, such as power dynamics and diversity. So what about the different relationship within psychology?
Maybe I can say some lines to that. I think, of course, we should partner with different fields, not only of psychology, but also of sociology and politics science and on all the other sciences. I mean, we really need this interdisciplinary approach, and I mean, everyone is saying that, but in my view, it's hardly ever done. Or it's, I mean, we really could do more of that, not only talk about it. For example, in the study of when studying psychology, you hardly ever learn anything about theories from sociology. Why is that? I mean, or from philosophy, which could be really inspiring for our psychological approaches. So of course we need to partner, but I'm not sure whether there are subdisciplines in psychology that really consider this power relations enough. I mean, at least in Germany, I don't know these subdisciplines. So that I mean, this is why critical psychology is there as a like approach from outside academia that's trying to bring these topics into academia or back into academia.
Yeah, maybe if I may add, I think there is this field, the subdiscipline of critical psychology, right? But they are to some extent completely disconnected from mainstream psychology, and they're not trying to engage with subdisciplines and trying to get them to become more critical. And I think that's what we are trying to do, to bridge between critical psychology and environmental psychology. I attended a conference actually in Germany on critical psychology with researchers that mainly work at sociology faculties, but consider themselves as psychologists, right? And their methods are completely different. Their language is completely different, and it's not in any way connected. The questions are similar in some regard, but we need to bridge this, I think, a lot more. And I think it's helpful to know that there are critical perspectives, but we need to bring them more together.
Okay, so just a very short information. If you want to know more about the Free Academia project and the Göteborg Manifesto, you can just search for, go visit the page freeacademia.org. Okay? This is particularly relevant because it's also related to the episodes of repression of protests of students and professors on political and environmental issues who are going on in many of the so-called democratic countries nowadays. So it's a very hot topic now. Let me just move to, we have time for one more question. It is you. You seem to clearly state that the current theories we have in psychology are not adequate, suitable for understanding the environmental crisis, and of course to find new ways. So, from what have you received so far for the book? What do you see as the most promising or innovative perspective that you think can be relevant for the future?
Well, I think to me are these works that really center the struggle by marginalized people. So projects that actually look at the views, perspectives, and how people are fighting back in ways where they're already suffering from environmental destruction and are still able to organize themselves. And I think this is really important work that supports these communities in a way. And I think we need this in a larger scale in a way. Yeah, and finding ways also to decolonize the knowledge production, decentering our wide views. And I think the discipline is so colorblind. I just stumbled upon a paper recently who looked at environmental behavior globally. And what they concluded is that people in the global north, or countries in the global north, are more open and more likely to engage in pro-environmental behavior. But if you look at it, it's all green consumerism. It's all under the perception of what we perceive to be sustainable. And it completely disregards the context outside of the Western world, and it is in a way already a racist interpretation often of data. And I think we have to overcome this by taking an anti-racist stand in a way, and confront ourselves also with our past in this regard of legitimizing the current misconduct and in like green coloniality, in like collection of materials, right, for green solar and so hydrogen in West Africa, wind farms in Sweden. They're all under the green sustainable narrative, but it's a continuation of exploitation, and I think we need to stand against this and do research that shows and problematizes these developments.
Thank you, thank you. We still have questions coming, so if you agree to stay with us for a little while, a little longer. I have a question, sorry, a comment, more than a question. We start with that. In order to reduce resistance to your thinking, it may be effective not to frame it as a distinct field. The whole field of psychology is colonized and needs to be decolonized, and not only environmental psychology. I mean, it's definitely a comment we can agree with. But Victoria has a question. Thank you for your interesting presentation. How do you position critical environmental psychology in relation to other academic disciplines? For instance, when it comes to theorizing on social change. Is the psychological contribution still on within groups dynamics? Put otherwise, what would the research focus of critical environmental psychology be? Hope it's clear enough.
Yeah, I can try to answer that. I think what is a common misunderstanding is that we want to like we want psychology to become sociology. So we don't say we need to like look at the structures. We're not saying that, but we say we want to look at individuals that are situated in a specific context. And I think this is really why critical psychology still is psychology and not, for example, sociology, because we're not looking at the structures, but we're still looking at individuals, but we're not like putting those individuals in wide rooms and let them press some keyboard keys and try to eliminate their economic and political and so on contexts, but we say we can only understand those people when we really look at the context they are living in. So that is, I think, the critical approach, and I would say, yes, it's a approach. I think critical thinking in a way is not a discipline. It cannot be taught in a way, and it cannot be it does not have this like disciplinary methodology or so. I think it's really an approach that you can live and that you can work with in different fields and in different disciplines.
Yeah, maybe if I may add, I'm taking trying to take a cultural psychological perspective on this, following Schroeder, who positioned that the psyche or individual behavior and culture make each other up in a constitutional way, right? And often we only look in one direction, and I think we need to look at both. We need to look beyond the immediate context. That is what social psychology often is doing, and includes certain variables as moderators maybe in their theorizing or in their evaluation. No, we need to really look at the historical cultural context, going above it. And I think there are some inspiring works that were in the slides already. There's a great team also in the US by Glenn Adams that is doing work into that direction that I would like to highlight. And I think flagging first, the first step is to flag that critical environmental psychology is in a way missing its target is the first step, and trying to find a common ground network. And then, the big question is how can we contribute to coming up with new suggestions. But I think this is often an interesting point where critical thinkers are being criticized for, right? But I don't agree that this is necessary, that a person who's criticizing the status quo and who's putting a lot of effort in it and resources to analyze and critique should at the same time right away have a solution how to change the status quo to a better world that you take even the people that upholding the status quo are convinced of. So I think the first step is to create an understanding of what is wrong in the discipline, find research that supports other people that criticize the status quo, and then maybe, hopefully on the way, find different solutions, right? And that's my current theory of change, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, of course, I mean, as some people are already asking how to get in touch with you, I mean, you gave all your contact, and hopefully this is the beginning of a fruitful dialogue, also with the International Environmental Justice Committee, and so it's now the time for me, first of all, to express my deep gratitude to both of you for this very interesting talk and for this very interesting initiative that we will follow. And on behalf of the International Environmental Justice Committee, I want to thank you and thank the webinar committee of the division for making all this possible. I also want to express my gratitude to all the people who joined, to the audience who asked questions, and we really would like to hear from you after this webinar. What is your feedback about the content, and help us to improve these events. So thank you very much again, Steffen and Sascha, and I wish all of you a good continuation of the day and a good and happy incoming weekend. So thank you very much.
Thank you also from our side.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.